webinar, we have two very eminent panelists who are going to talk to us today. The first talk is, sir does not need actually any introduction. He's a well-known agriculture economist. He's a director of EGROW Foundation and also a professor of applied economics at Indian Institute of Public Administration, Delhi. He's ex-chairman of CACP, that is the Commission of Agriculture Cost and Prices, a post equivalent to a secretary of the Government of India as part of Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. He has rich experience in the formulation of agriculture pricing, fixing of MSPs for agriculture commodities. He has also served as part of the FAO, a branch of United Nations organization, as Chief Technical Advisor. He's going to be our first speaker, and after that we are going to have a very eminent economist of our country, Professor Charan Singh, who most of you must have seen on the TV channels. He is presently the CEO of EGROW Foundation. He was earlier the professor of economics at Indian Institute of Management, IIM Bangalore, where he has taught comparative monetary policy and policy issues related to the Indian economy. He has also been senior economist at International Monetary Fund, headquarters at Washington, DC. And before that, about 20 years with Reserve Bank of India as GM. He is presently the chairman, Punjab Sindh Bank, Board of Directors of NABARD and National Housing Bank. We are pleased to invite both these eminent speakers with us. And without wasting any more time, I would first go to our first speaker, Dr. Ashok Vishandas, to enlighten us on the very topical issue of the three farm bills. Sir, today the audience which we have are basically young boys and girls who are preparing for competitive examination, mostly for defense services, but for other government services also. Over to you for your session now. Dr. Ashok Vishandas.
Thank you, Colonel MP Singh. Thank you, my co-panelist, Charan Singh, and my young friends. They are, I can see they are about 75 in number. And my best wishes to one and all for your endeavors. Whatever you try to do, you will achieve under the very, very vibrant leadership of Colonel MP Singh. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever in my mind that all of you will succeed whatever you aim at. Let me begin with this. Today we are going to talk about the three farm bills. Let me start with before I coming to the bills as such, let me give a broad aerial view of what the agriculture is. Agriculture, you understand that when gold is gold when it is sold. If you are having a lot of gold but it is not sellable in the market, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir. You're absolutely clear.
Yeah. So gold is gold when it is sold. What farmers produce is no less precious than the gold. What happens, but yet their income had not risen to a commensurate level. So obviously there is something missing. Now, what is that missing? We'll discuss today, and then through the three farm bills, why and what about these three bills. Let me start with a presentation, and then we can have the question answer later on. Let me just give me a half a minute to share my screen. Yeah. Is my screen audible, visible to everybody?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yeah. So let me start with what the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi said. Agriculture has a key role in making India 5 trillion economy. It is a backbone of the economy, agriculture. Importance of agriculture be viewed not from the perspective of just food security, but it goes far beyond this. Heavy dependence on key food stuff has ramification on national sovereignty. What wheat aid to India in mid-1960 by the US, just as an example, I'm sure most of us were not born by that time, but we must know the history, was sought to be used as an as an instrument to arm twist its own country. What happened in the mid 60s? We were heavily dependent on US, and then we were from ship to mouth. If they used to send us the shipment of wheat, then we used to feed our own citizens. And if they stopped, and suddenly in the mid 60s, the US stopped wheat shipment, and our honorable Prime Minister of that time, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, has to rush to US. She was humiliated by making her wait for over 4 hours. A sovereign country's prime minister was made to wait in the US, in the White House, for over 4 hours, and she was so self-respecting that she has to return. She left the White House without meeting the president of US at that time, Lyndon B. Johnson, and they were able to do this kind of treatment to a prime minister of such a big country, because we were not sufficient to meet our own population. And that's the I am just giving this as an illustration what the key staple food, if you are not sufficient, how you will be treated. And you look at your neighborhood, your own maid, and everybody, because if you are not self-sufficient in terms of food, you have to you have to experience, you have to face all this kind of humiliation. A sovereign country's prime minister is made to wait despite the appointment, and that's a national humiliation. So I am just giving this as an example to underscore the importance of agriculture and the food, because we are lucky that we have never experienced hunger, therefore we don't value it. But to my mind, this is most important point, because this is a key staple which we have to value it. And therefore, we have to value the farmers who are the producer of those key staple food. India, now rest is history. India moved from import dependence to self-sufficiency, and then to net food exporting country. Now, I understand by Colonel MP Singh, many of you are desirous and aim at joining the armed forces. And let me give another example of armed forces. We would have never become nuclear power in 74 if we were not food sufficient. That also nobody can understand the linkage of food with the nuclear and the military rule and the military capability. I think we despite so many other countries of that time in 74, I'm sure everybody in the audience knows the Pokhran history, 1974 and 1998. Even the first nuclear explosion took place in 1974 in Pokhran, and we were able to do because we were food sufficient. So my salute to farmers, my salute to those Annadata who made us proud of the country. I mean, we have to keep in the back of mind, this is just as a prelude, and then I will come to the main thing. Now, in our country, a paradoxical situation exists. Per capita income is rising, production of food grain is rising, but at the same time, number of malnutrition is also increasing. Number of stunted children is also increasing. This is a paradox of highest order. Huge disparity in income level in agriculture and non-agriculture sectors exists. India has a strong advantage in agri sector. Agriculture contributes 15% of GDP and livelihood for more than 50% of population. World largest producer of spices, pulses, milk, tea, cashew, jute, bananas, jackfruits. Second largest producer of wheat, rice, fruits and vegetables, sugarcane, cotton and oilseeds. Fourth largest producer of agrochemicals. Largest livestock population of around 536 million, that is 31% of the livestock. Largest land area under irrigation. Top 5 net exporting in the world. Now, it's a kind of situation that we have a huge aeroplane, but no fuel. Can we fly? Many of you, I am sure, going to join the Air Force. Just visualize the situation. I mean, these data, I'm just sensitizing you to see that we have a huge aeroplane, but still we are not able to fly because we don't have the basic thing, the fuel, which will make it propel. Agriculture engages 43% of total workforce, 60% of country's total land, and 83% of the fresh water. India is net food exporting country now after feeding 1.35 billion people. Yet farmers' income level have not increased as expected. Rural poverty, 1 out of every 4 rural people are still live under poverty. Clearly something is missing out in agriculture. We need to find that missing fuel which would take our agriculture to new heights. We seek to do the diagnostic as well as the policy prescription through this discussion today. Now, developing a strong ecosystem is a key focus area for the government. Create a consistent and standardized agri framework across the country. Attract capital and technology to our agrarian economy. Provide marketing intervention for both agriculture buyers and sellers. Access to better marketing avenues for farmers' produce, freeing up the sector from restrictive law. Now, these 3 new farm legislation to create a free and efficient agri ecosystem. What are those 3? Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation, that is Act 2020, to end the monopoly of APMC, that is Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee, and allow anyone to freely purchase and sell agriculture produce, giving farmers multiple market options, inter and intra-state. Inter means between the state, intra means within the state. And Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act 2020 provide legal framework for agreement between farmers and the buyers, including processor, wholesaler, large retailer, and people like this. And the third law is Essential Commodity Amendment Act 2020. So these are the 3 pieces of legislation which are the landmark legislation in the history of agriculture in India. Let me also add that when 1990 we have a LPG kind of budget in 1991. LPG means liberalization, liberalize, privatization, and globalization. That kind of thing, that reforms were taken in sectors other than agriculture. So agriculture escaped those reforms in 1991. So this is a second generation kind of reforms, and these are the landmark. Now let me discuss on the first piece of legislation, Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020. This act of 21 number of 2020, just to give an idea, because you are going to appear in competitive exam, these basic things you must know. This act number 21 is domain, the applicability is the entire country, territorial extent is entire country. The bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 14th September 2020, passed in Lok Sabha on 17th September. Rajya Sabha passed it on 20th September, and the presidential assent was given to it on 27th September of the same year. And this was introduced by our Honorable Agriculture Minister, Singh Tomarji. Now, what is the background? Farmers Produce Trade Commerce, it was an ordinance on 5th June 2020, the same year. I hope you understand, many of you must be understanding the difference between the bill act and ordinance. Ordinance is necessitated when the parliament is not in session and the government can issue an order without discussion in the parliament. That's called ordinance. And when they get the approval of the parliament and the president gives an assent, it becomes an act. So that you should know. And the bill is in between. Bill means when it is that document, the same document when it is under discussion and consideration, it's called the bill. So as a young student and young aspirant for the government job, you must know the difference between these terms: ordinance, bill, and act. Now, this act permits intra and interstate trade of farmers and farmers produce beyond the physical premises of APMC and other market notified under the state APMC. The provisions say the trade of farmers produce allows farmers to trade in outside trade areas such as farm gate. Now let us understand the APMC. As per existing provision, existing means before the bill came into being, that means before the act came into being, the farmers were mandated to take the transaction only within the APMC. Now you can imagine, I'm sure some of your parents must be in the business. Now a businessman has the privilege, and rightly so, to sell his produce anywhere in the country or abroad. But farmers is one thing which is nowhere in the country, in any other commodity. They are bound to sell not as per their choice, are not to the person of their choice, but essentially in a particular place called APMC. Now, this was too restrictive and very kind of Decorian kind of law, and farmers were under the shackles of middlemen, which is called Aratia, and people like this. So we have to appreciate only when you can visualize the farmers' plight and their travels. Alternative trading channels facilitates lucrative prices for the farmers via alternative trading channels to promote barrier-free, and this is the key word, barrier-free intra-state and interstate of agriculture produce. Now we have to understand, we have one nation, for instance, just to give an example, we have one nation, one card, one ration card. Now likewise, why farmer has to bind themselves into APMC or in the state? The whole nation is one, and we are citizen of India, not of a particular state or a village. So we have full right to trade anywhere we choose. So in democracy, freedom of choice is the key. Farmer never enjoyed that FOC. Even you as a young student, if suppose somebody wants you to appear in a particular exam, not in other, how do you feel? Just to give an illustration. So similar, farmers were under very difficult situation, and they were too restrictive, so there was not much freedom. Now this particular piece of legislation will give them a complete freedom of choice, FOC. Now electronic trading, this is also permissible under this, and also facilitates direct and online buying and selling of agricultural produce via electronics devices and internet. Market fee abolished. Earlier, the farmers were mandated to give, no, sorry, in the transaction of that agriculture produce in the APMC, the buyer were obliged to pay 2.5% of the mandi fee. Now you keep in the back of mind, we'll revert to this and what are the implications of that. The buyer, not the seller, that means not the kisan or farmer were obliged to pay, but it impinges on this. I will come a little later on what are the implications of this. So this market fee of 2.5%, of course it varies from state to state, but I am giving a general kind of thing, Punjab and Haryana, because they are the dominant state in terms of the production of agriculture, particularly rice and wheat. So the market fees are 2.5%, and in absolute term, it translated into about rupees 4,500 to 5,000 crore per annum. So that is the cause of pain in the middleman. So now on 5th June 2020, the farmer, this particular was, I have explained the difference between the bill, ordinance and the act. So this ordinance came into being on 5th January, or 5th June, and territorial extent is the entire country. Bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 14th September, passed in the same house on 17th September. The upper house passed in on 20th September, and president gave assent to it on 27th September. And same thing, it was introduced by our Honorable Agriculture Minister, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji. Now, what are the provision of this? Farming agreement. This provides for a farming agreement between a farmer and a buyer prior to the production of or rearing of any farm produce. Minimum period of farming agreement is one crop season or one production cycle of livestock, because this is applicable on livestock. So one season of the production cycle of livestock. That's the minimum, not the maximum. And maximum period of farming agreement is 5 years. If the production cycle of any farming produce is longer and may go beyond 5 years, the maximum period of farming agreement may be mutually decided by the farmer and the buyer, and the explicitly mentioned in the agreement. It has to be mentioned in the farming agreement. Pricing of farming produce and the process of price determination should be mentioned in the agreement. For prices subject to variation, there is also a flexibility in the act. In the act, you can have a variation, but a guaranteed minimum price for the produce and is clear reference for any additional amount above the guaranteed price must be specified in the agreement. And if there is a dispute, then a three layer dispute settlement mechanism, conciliation board, SDM, and appellate authority do exist. Now, third is Essential Commodity Act. Now, see, this Essential Commodity Act originally, it came into being in 1955. And at that time, as I said in the beginning, country was grappling with lot of food stuff imports, and so we were heavily dependent. At that time, it was absolutely imperative to have some kind of stock limits. So this Essential Commodity Act of 1955 was going on from 1955 till 2020. That means 65 years this was going on. And when situation has changed, because as I told you, we are import dependent, then we become self-sufficient. Now we are food exporting country, a proud nation of food exporting country. But this Essential Commodity Act had not undergone changes. See, the world is changing rapidly. We have to keep pace with those changes in order to be smart. We have not touched those. And at that time, there was a lot of shortage. So the necessity of the time of that year and that era it dictated that we should have that kind of ordinance which was relevant at that time. So once we have changed the situation, the act has to go. But we have not been able to do away with this. On this was the time this particular government did it, and then it's good for the nation that they made the amendment. Now this, like the other two pieces of legislation, this was also given accent by the Honorable President of India. So the ordinance came into act in September 20. Now EC Act on 5th June, again the similar story. The Essential Commodity Act promulgated by the Union Cabinet. It was enacted in 1955. Powers of the central government, Government of India, GOI means Government of India, regulates the production, supply, and distribution of a whole host of commodity. It declares essential. In the opinion of Government of India, if certain commodity are essential, that has to be this act will attract those kind of commodity, and government will make it available at the fair prices. Can also fix under the act MRP, that means maximum retail price of any packaged product that it declares as an essential commodity. Can add commodity in this list when the need arises and can take them off the list once the situation improves. If a certain commodity is in short supply, its price is spiking, the government can notify stock holding limits on it for a specified period of time as well. Now, stock limit. Let us appreciate this. Imposition of any stock limit on agriculture produce can be based on price rise. Now, can be imposed if a 100% increase in the retail price of horticulture produce. Suppose a onion is being sold at 30 rupees, so it comes under horticulture crop. Its price becomes 60 rupees. Then the government can act. Then they can put certain stock limit on this. But in case of non-perishable commodity such as rice and other any food stuff other than horticulture, 50% increase in the retail price of non-perishable agricultural commodity, then government can put stock limit on this. Now, how to calculate the 50% increase or 100% increase is very simple. They have to calculate the price prevailing immediately preceding 12 months. What was the price? Suppose we are now in December 2020. So 50% increase or 100% increase, as depends on the commodity, will be compared to the price that prevailed in December 2019. That is one way. Or average retail price of the last 5 years. Whichever is lower, then the price will be attracted. I mean, this act will be attracted. Now, what are the benefits? Because the question arises, what are the benefits the government seeks to, I mean, these pieces of legislation are expected to yield what kind of benefit? The farmers produce trade and commerce, more choice in selling their produce. Because you see, if even as a simple psychology you took, suppose you go to a restaurant, only rice and pulses, the dal bhat is offered. You may like it, but if you have no choice, you may have some disinclination to continue with that kind of restaurant. Now, essence of freedom and essence of psychology and your own being is freedom. Now, farmer will have a choice to sell wherever. Now, may I request to mute your kindly. I am listening certain voices. Kindly mute your.
Arjun.
Is somebody?
Sir, just a minute, sir. Arjun, mute everyone.
Sir, mute everyone, sir.
Okay.
Accept me.
Sir, yeah, accept. No, you, sir, you please unmute yourself. So he can
okay.
Everyone. So the speaker can unmute, sir, immediately.
Okay. Thank you very much, MP. The point is now more choice in selling that. Now, as a producer, I must have choice. If I am a captive seller, I have no freedom. Therefore, I will have no negotiating chip to bargain or negotiate the price of my produce. So that's absolutely unacceptable in a democratic setup. I hope you appreciate this point. Even a child, if you ask him to eat only the dal bhat, he may do one day, second day, but he is not going to continue for a long time. Similarly, farmer also requires some kind of freedom. Now, transparency and better provision of services in marketplaces, it enables farmers to have a regime of transparency, because now what happens, whatever the price is decided, there is a lot of cartelization among the Aratiya, the mandi places. There are so many malpractices. So once farmer reach in the mandi and with all his produce, it is almost impossible for him to go back to their farm or their home with those produce, because it involves a lot of opportunity cost, the transportation cost. So whatever be the price offered to him, willy-nilly, wishy-washy, he sells even under duress. So that situation, and the Aratiya, the middlemen, know that farmers will not be able to go back, therefore they exploit the situation. So we have to keep this in back of mind, and how it gives the freedom of choice to the farmer. And interstate movement and price for farmer. You see, I will come in another slide when the prices of the same commodity of the same variety increase, variation between at different places is very violent, and the farmer will have the benefit of setting up e-trading platform. The farmers empowerment and protection agreement on price assurance and farm services. They have the direct contract between buyer and seller, no link, no conflict with the APMC, fair price and faster payment, consistent income and farmer, crop intelligence support, traceability, quality control, farmers to have access to modern technology and better input. The Essential Commodity Act is likely to have stability of market prices for consumers, uplift in the investment in storage facility, cold storage, and better price realization for farmers. Now here, look at this. Now price dispersion at farm gate in select crop goes up to 5.6. That means price of the same commodity of the same grade could be 100 rupees at one place and 560 rupees in another place. That is the maximum, just as an illustration for groundnut. But then the same story in a varying degree is for so many other crops. The price dispersion at the farm gate is a clear indicator for the need of a single one market ideal. So ratio of highest to lowest crop price, state-wise average, this has been worked out, and that shows how much inefficiency in the markets prevail. Now, these three pieces of legislation will address to a great extent those inefficiency in the market. Because I'm not saying it will completely wipe out the inefficiency, but it will address to a great extent. That's the purpose of these legislation. Now, let me give the concluding remark. These three pieces of legislation are game changer initiative to unlock the value chain benefits for all stakeholders. The approach to agriculture sector cannot remain in a narrow prism of traditional farmers' discipline. Farmers' prosperity and their welfare has been brought at the center of development agenda. Requires a multitude of cross-domain consideration in bringing a holistic and long-lasting strategy to the agriculture sector. Indian agrarian societies will find renewed global predominance as the world faces growing population. Now, let me also add, because I'm very happy to know you are aspirant for the military. So let me give a very relevant example of rocket launching. Now, what we did, see, the rocket can be launched when you fire from the bottom, not from the top. What India did, the cardinal mistake. In 1991, I'm sure you are aware of what happened in the LPG, I said, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Those reforms came for the tertiary sector, that means services, secondary sector, manufacturing, but agriculture, that is the primary sector, because economy can be divided into three camps. Primary sector, agriculture is major part of this. Secondary is manufacturing, and tertiary sector is the services, tourism, IT, and all things like that. So the government of 1991, when the reforms were introduced in India, they started from the top. And the danger of this is the trickle down effect is very slow. And when you are starting reform, where is the demand? Unless you start the reforms from the bottom will generate the income levels, rise the income level of the people in the village where 68% of population live. And unless you ensure demand is generated, how that in the absence of demand, those reforms in the tertiary sector will help the nation. That is the cardinal mistake we did. Now, to make this mistake, to undo that mistake, these three legislation will help in undoing, because that will create a demand. and then rural economy will expand, then manufacturing will also benefit, and then tertiary sector, that is the boom, IT boom and things like that will work. Now, contrast is, I'm not a very, China's, I normally do not have the China's as an example, but this is just as a contrast. What the China did? China did that they started their reforms in agriculture, and see how they have reached. Though there are many other reasons why China is far ahead in some sense compared to India, but that is an example. They launched their rocket by firing from the bottom. I hope you appreciate this, and with this I stop here, and if any question either now or a little later, I'll be happy to answer those questions, and let me stop now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, MP, and thanks
Thank you very much.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, please keep your audios off. Please keep your audios off, everyone. I will be reading the questions asked by you, about 2-3 questions which I find pertinent. I will be giving it to the speaker. And sir, there are some questions which has been typed in the type box. Firstly, of course, the question was that if this bill, and why the agitation? So that's
Yes.
one question which is there in mind, sir, of a lot of students. So please clarify that, and then I will come to some other question related to the
Yeah,
bill.
this is a very good question. Now, before I answer, let us appreciate. See, life. Let me give two illustration of this before. I mean, that will answer the question. Uh, See, life is a two-person zero-sum game. Now, somebody's advantage will cause some disadvantage to somebody. In this particular game, if farmers are going to be happy, and given their income is going to rise by through these three pieces of legislation, somebody in some sense has to pay. Here, Aratia used to make a lot of money of about just in Punjab, one state, uh, 4,500 to 5,000 crore, as per my estimate, uh, on the marketing cess and that commission, just a commission of the, and on top of it, state government used to get a lot of cess. So these things, because it is going to hit them, therefore they are agitating on the shoulder of, they are firing from the shoulder of farmer, and farmer are being misled. This is one illustration why the agitation. Let me give another example. Now, India used to give the minimum support price under right from 1965. That means 55 years we have been using this minimum support price. Now take the example of Canada. No less person than the Prime Minister of Canada is criticizing this particular government on these farm legislation. They say India is doing not the good thing, and this is anti-farmer. Now, this may be convincing if, and what is that if? When we support our farmers for minimum support price in WTO, that is World Trade Organization, the same Canada opposed us that why you are giving so much subsidy to the farmer. Now, this is a pure and blatant case of politics. Even at the international player are playing politics depending upon the situation. Now, I hope you are clear on this. The WTO, the same country, Canada, opposed India that why you are giving so much minimum support price to the farmers, and this is a subsidy, so you are distorting the market. In WTO, they say that when the farmers are agitating, they are showing a very false sympathy with the farmer. Now, similar things, I mean, this is one country. Now, I hope you are very intelligent people. You understand the underlying uh, sense of exigency of a particular player. Now, these two examples will amply illustrate why there is so much agitation.
Right, sir.
I hope I have answered this question.
Absolutely, sir. Now, one very typical question, one Rohit Pathak is asking, when the corporate sector will come to agriculture, will they not start dominating farmers?
See, when cooperative come, now look at the milk. There was no MSP. Look at the poultry. Look at the fishery. There there are cooperative, but there is no MSP, and
Absolutely.
still they are flourishing, and their income level is more than the income level of the farmer. So cooperative many times they help. So cooperative per se is not bad. Only these see now look at this. Imagine a situation, you a shirt, just a shirt. If you go to a shopkeeper, you walk to shopkeeper and then choose. Now, what is your attitude? And suppose shopkeeper comes to your home, madam, ye dekh lijiye, ye hamari achhi shirt hai. You will treat him very differently. The question is where you want to sell. Now here, through these three pieces of legislation, farmer have the choice to sell anywhere, including his own farm gate, including in his own farm, own home. Now, which is invisible advantage to the farmer. And if I sell from my workplace or my production center to the other person's home or anywhere he want, I will be given a different treatment. I will never have a upper hand in terms of negotiation. Whatever the price they offer, that is given. And everybody must have experience. Suppose you are at home, somebody bells your doorbell and then say, I want to sell this. How you treat, I don't have to explain this, and the farmers were treated worse than that, because
Yes,
I have interacted with the farmers, 60,000 farmers in the last 20 years personally, not in a group, in a very small group, in the sense very small, 5-10 farmers. And likewise I have, so how they are given the shape, how they are given the treatment when they are made to sell at the buyer's place rather than their own place.
A very good example you have given, sir. Somebody coming to a doorstep and selling, and here the corporates will come to the doorstep of farmers.
Yes, so market comes to the farmers' farm gate.
Market comes to the farmers rather than farmers going into money and begging, selling their produce. So
Right.
one very interesting question. Somebody probably did not get the hint. Is by Kushagra Dhawan. He's saying how the food sufficiency was an important factor in India's becoming nuclear power. Please throw some light on this, sir, because some students have not got that hint what you wanted to say.
Let me be very blunt, and I hope, because I was in two minds whether I can give this example, but the example is very
Absolutely,
good.
you are absolutely hit on, sir. If you are not,
no, I'm giving another example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
What the question I'm trying to ask, reply to this question MP just now asked about the nuclear.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
And kindly excuse me if somebody, because that example has some kind of very radical example. Now, in a good old movie, there was a chakra, movie chakra, name was chakra, wheel. So there is a episode, a newly young person was married and he was working with a jamidar of that area. He was the top person of that in terms of which financial and muscle power. He was very, very powerful. And this gentleman, young boy of 23 years, was working with him almost as a bonded laborer. And he because he used to depend on everything, especially the food, on that person, and that person on the night of his marriage. And very casually he told him that आज अपनी wife को मेरे पास भेज देना रात को. And this is a movie, but it illustrates the point of importance of food. If you are hungry and begging bell and begging ball, you can never take independent decision.
Absolutely, sir, because we are non-signatory to NPT.
No, it doesn't matter, but you will be under tremendous pressure.
Yeah. And if you are
if you are citizen, If your children or my children are hungry, I can compromise to any level, because that is the psychology.
Right. And
And
they would not have allowed us to do nuclear testing under no
it would not have, otherwise we would always be afraid of the repercussion and the sanctions. Now we don't bother if sanctions are imposed on us. And we faced those sanctions even in 98, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was our prime minister. We faced so many sanctions and for so many years, but we roughed weather, we faced those.
Yes.
And we came stronger. Our resolve become strong. But if you are hungry, your population is hungry, your children are hungry, nobody can afford to take that bold decision, whatever be the NPT or no NPT.
Absolutely. So I think we'll end the session here, sir. It was a fantastic and lively session which you have conducted with so many examples and illustrations. And I'm sure any one of you, I myself have really been enlightened much beyond what I was seeing on the media. Because media was covering only one bit of it, one part of it. But your illustrations and your explanations have really made us absolutely understand these bills. And certainly your experience of meeting the farmers and comes your talk comes from that experience. So thank you so much, sir, for giving us a detailed account of these three bills. And let's hope, because all of you have realized that during the COVID season, the economy world over took a nosedive, it took a dip, and the GDP and the growth both were compromised to a great extent. Now certainly the recovery has started, but where do we see, and especially keeping in mind our vision of 5 trillion economy, which Ashok sir also mentioned. So how do we see that? We go on to one of our eminent economists of our country, Professor Charan Singh, to enlighten us on this issue. Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much, Dr. MP, for inviting me to your session. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And am I visible?
Yes,
Yes.
you are very much visible.
Oh, okay. Thank you. This was also very enlightening listening to Dr. Ashok, who's my colleague and in a way my classmate also. So, and I found his presentation was very, very clear and very, very simple. And that's what I like, analytically strong and put in simple words. Now, let me continue with this journey of talking to your students. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk of the Indian economy, and I'm also going to talk about where we are heading for and what do I look will happen in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from basics. There's a PowerPoint which I'm sharing with you. I'm going to start from the very basics, and from this very basics, we will take on. So let me now move to the slide, which is my favorite slide. Can you see the slide now? So this is my favorite slide, and the slide is showing you that in 2014, there was a paradigm shift in our country, and suddenly we wanted to grow at a very high rate. Earlier, we were growing slowly like an elephant, and there used to be a term called the Hindu rate of growth, which meant that we were growing around 2 to 3% per year, that is all. And then we wanted to grow faster. So there's a paradigm shift that happened. The paradigm shift that happened was mainly because we had a change politically, and the change brought in that we want to relook at our growth strategies. What was the new thing? What was the relook at the growth strategies? We wanted to now industrialize in a big way. And why had we not industrialized all this time? We had not industrialized all this time because, as Dr. Vishandas was saying, we had China as our neighbor, and China had started its liberalization in 1978. If you look at China and India in 1977, we were better than China in terms of growth indicators. But by 1978, China liberalized, and then we will see what happened, but you know that China went far ahead. In their journey that they went far ahead, they had basically taken to industrialization. Now, when we talk of industrialization, let me give you a simple example. In 1978, there was no foreign-owned company operating in China. And by March 2020, that is about 45 years later, there were 9,60,000 companies operating in China. And most of them were in industry. So China had leapt far ahead in industry, and we said we want to catch up on industry. So you must have heard that time the Prime Minister saying Make in India, and this famous lion that you can see on the right side upper place, where we show that we were an elephant slowly moving, and then we wanted to become a roaring lion and wanted to grow further. But then, if you look at ourselves, we knew where we are. We are at a very infant stage, a little cub. And how do we reach there? Now, that was the challenge which we were facing. And soon we coined the term that we wanted to become a $5 trillion economy. And I try to tell you in the next 15 to 20 minutes as to where we are, what we are planning, how the world looks at us, how our strategy is to reach that target. So the way we measure growth worldwide is looking at gross domestic product, GDP. I'm sure that you are aware and familiar with the term called gross domestic product. We can look at it from two different angles. We can look at it from the angle of total expenditure in the country, or we can look at the angle of total income earned in the country. Basically, that comes from a conceptual thing, which we say we are looking at the circular flow. Now, what is the circular flow? The circular flow says there are households, people, families, and there are firms. And what is the difference? The firm basically is a place where there's equipment and machinery, and people from the household go there. They offer their labor. And when you say they offer their labor, what do they offer? They offer their hands, they offer their mind, and then they work in the firm. When they work in the firm, what is going to happen? There's machinery there, and the labor and machinery come together. And what do? They produce goods. Now, when they produce goods, what will happen? The firm has to pay them for the goods that has been produced. So that becomes income for the household. And what will the household do with the income? They will spend it. On what will they spend? They will spend on goods which have been produced by the firm. So now I can measure the total output in the country either by looking at total income or total expenditure. So even if I can make an assessment of total expenditure, I will know how much is the total output produced in the country. Now, this is the standard formula which is used in economics, and I thought I'll share this with you. If I have
Sir, just a minute. There's somebody, I think, inadvertently has done some marking on the screen. So I'll request you for a minute to, remove the screen and then rescreen it. Then these markings will go, I think. So they are hindering our this thing.
They are hindering. Otherwise, I'm okay with it.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
So now there are various components of expenditure, but you can think for yourself, what all are you going, if you have income, what are you going to do with the income? If you have income, you are going to consume. And what will you consume on? On food, on clothes. You may consume on some durable goods, some immediate things. There'll be some type of consumption, what non-durables and durables. You will save something. When you save something, you will invest somewhere. So we are going to invest, and that is sort of an expenditure. Then government is going to spend. And where does government get the money from? We are paying taxes to the government, and the government is going to spend from that collected amount of taxes. So then let me go back. The consumption is of the private sector. Private sector can buy things which are durables and non-durables. And the government can also buy goods which are, government is going to spend on goods which are immediately required, or something on which we need a few years to go, which we can call as capital expenditure. And then what else are we going to spend our money on? We are going to import certain things. We're going to spend on it. But then you can tell me that, okay, we will import certain things. We may also export certain things. So we are going to take a net picture of how much we import, how much we export. Because we are looking at total domestic production within the country, we are going to say, okay, this is what I exported. To some extent, this is what was imported, and this is my net position. So this is how the economists worldwide, not one single country, worldwide, they compute their GDP. And what I've shared with you is the expenditure method of computing GDP. We take consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Having just shared this basic concept with you, now let's look at the figure once again that I had shared with you. The elephant, and then the tiger, and then a little cup. Now, what does that mean? So this is, sorry, I should have completed this. This is the total identity which I was mentioning, value of total output, and that is the aggregate expenditure. Let's keep moving. So this is the comparative picture of the world, where we want to be and where we are. India, as you can see, is a less than a $3 trillion economy, whereas China is a $14 trillion economy. UK is like India, less than a $3 trillion economy, and USA is the largest economy in the world, and that is nearly $21 trillion economy. So that is where we are. If you look at the population, our population is around 1.3 billion. China's population is around 1.4 billion. England's population is about 66 million. America's population is about 330 million. So that means America's population is nearly 1/4 of our population. And UK's population is so less, there's hardly any comparison. Now, if you divide the total output in the country, and I explained how output is measured, if you divide total output in the country by the population, you get the per capita income. Now look at the per capita income, and you will realize that India is way behind these countries. Our per capita income is just about $2,000 vis-a-vis China, where it is $10,000, compared to UK, which is $42,000, and America, where it is nearly $66,000. Now, the standard global practice of computing GDP, and when you do a comparison, you realize that India, though is a less than $3 trillion economy, as is UK, our per capita income is very, very less. So now we have one understanding that our per capita income is low. The other understanding we have is our total output is as much as that of UK. But when we compare 2019 with 2020 and 2021, just keep this in mind. The other thing I want to bring to your notice is, as countries grow and develop, industry starts playing an important role, but services play a far more important role. In the economic history, first agriculture dominates, then industry dominates, and then services dominate. In our country, what had happened is, because industry had gone to China, there was a time when agriculture was around 18%, services were 60%, industry wasn't playing a very important role. We are bringing it back because industry does provide lots of jobs and lots of security. So now if you look at this pattern, you can see the USA, agriculture only plays a role of 1%, industry is about 20%, and services about 78%. Similar is the story with the UK. To some extent, you can see it in transition in China. Agriculture is 8%, industry is 40%, and services 52%. India has still started the journey, but a long way to go. So this is the third point I wanted to share with you in this slide. Now let's start looking at where we are and what the picture globally is. I showed you a picture of only 4 countries there. Here the picture is much bigger, and you can see for yourself that I have brought the BRICS here. Now what are BRICS? BRICS is talking of comparative countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and these days we also sometimes speak of other countries, normally South Africa. So we have started talking of Brazil, China here. I've shown you Russia, and you can see amongst all these countries, India's per capita income is relatively way behind of other countries, even which are in the same status like emerging market economies where we in India are. Now, given the situation that I've just shared with you, let's see what the pandemic did and what is the pandemic going to look at us in future. If you look at the growth from 2017, world output, we were growing in the range of 3 to 4%. And suddenly in 2020, as you can see, the world output is going to crash. It's going to be negative minus 4.4%. By 2021, we will be in the positive zone. We will be around 5%. Now, who are the countries, which are the countries which have been most badly hit in this pandemic? And you can see for yourself on the screen, advanced countries, I've listed here for you. USA is going to suffer a hit of 4.3%, Euro area about -8%, and then France is -9.8%, Italy is -10%, Spain is -12%, United Kingdom is -10%, 9.8%. And now, why should we worry about them? Let them suffer, let them have a negative growth. We are worried about them because our exports are going to suffer. Remember the equation I just showed you? I said this is the net exports, how much I am producing in the country, but I am sending it out. So exports are going to suffer if these countries are in the negative zone. Now here is India. You can see that India was growing in the speed of 7% per year. It was the fastest growing economy on the planet in 17. Even in 18, we were growing fast, very fast. Again, the fastest growing country. By 2019, started getting the shocks and we were slowing down. By 2020, because of pandemic, you can see that we are down by -10%. But by 2021, we would have improved and we will boom back into the fastest growing country of the world, and our growth rate will be 8.8%. Herein, I've shown you some other emerging countries. You can see, for example, Brazil, Russia, China, and you can see South Africa here. Now, yes, in the current year, 2020, we have been the most badly hit at -10. But if you look, we are going to bounce back. And by 2021, we will be the fastest growing country in the world again. Now, these are projections where I've taken a little longish, going back, little longish trend. And all I'm trying to show is that we were a country which was to reckon with for a long time. And though the hit has been a little larger than relatively other countries, one need not worry because basically a strong country in terms of growth. Now here is the export story which I shared with you, and you can see the growth here is going till 2025. And the point that I'm making here is that yes, our exports will suffer in the current year, but by 2025, we will be back to the standards that we were in 2018. So that means our exports will recover and production will benefit from the export market. In the meantime, other countries' growth will also improve, like America, Canada, Italy, France. I showed you they were in the negative zone. Their growth will start improving and they will come into the positive zone. With that, our exports will start rising further. Now, if you look at inflation, which is another indicator of how's the economy doing in 2020, we are suffering from little high inflation, 4.9%. As you can see, this is the highest inflation amongst other countries. This has an implication on the exchange rate also. If our inflation is high, our currency tends to depreciate. But soon we will, by 2021, we will control our inflation. It will be 3.7, not the highest. Other countries are in the range of 3. But by 2025, unfortunately, our inflation is again projected to go little high. But again, we are not the outlier. There are other countries which will have inflation more than ours. So exchange rate implications one can understand with rising inflation. Now, what is going to happen in the post-pandemic world and what is happening right now? In about a month and a half, the government will come out with a new budget. But in the last year budget that was announced, which is running now, we find that the gross fiscal deficit was expected to be around 3.5%, but so much of expenditure the government had to do, and the tax collection was not there for obvious reasons. Though now they say the GST collection has risen back to nearly 1 lakh crore a month, which is very good, but overall collection has been low. The fear is that we will close the year with 12% gross fiscal deficit. So what is gross fiscal deficit? Gross fiscal deficit is total expenditure of the government minus tax collection. And in COVID period, when tax collection has been so low relatively, but expenditure has been so high, higher than the previous years, higher than the collection of taxes, so the deficit is around 12%, which is very high. During this pandemic period, the biggest worry is that there has been lockdown, and because of lockdown, the businesses have been closed. Yes, to some extent businesses have been closed, but let's analyze it a little more carefully. During the pandemic, what closed? The government continued to work, the banks continued to work, insurance companies, IT companies, people continue to work from home. For educational institutions also continue to work and all working from home. What was happening is, to some extent, MSMEs were closed. To some extent, unorganized sector, in terms of hawkers, they were closed. For 3 months, there was a total lockdown, and after that, slowly opening of the economy took place. Large industry, when I say MSME, it means micro, small, and medium industries. But large industry, say Toyota or Tata's, they started also opening after the initial 100% lockdown, and there are different stages in which they also opened up. So the industry to some extent was impacted for 2 to 3 months totally, and partial lockdown and therefore opening up. That certainly impacted their business. As I showed you, the global economy was slowing down, export markets were also down. So to that extent, the sales orders were impacted. Now, when industry is down, it is obvious that the banks which have lent to the industry, they are going to suffer. How are they going to suffer? The loan repayments will not take place. Interest payments will not happen. So therefore, who will face the stress? The banking sector will face the stress. How does the banking sector handle this? So they have something called the non-performing assets. Every year, they identify certain assets in which either the interest payment has not come for a certain time, which is 90 days or 3 months, and they are not comfortable with the cash flow into the firm, and therefore they can go to the owner of the firm and say, please tell us what is happening. If the owner is able to rationally explain, they may restructure the loan, or they may classify it as a non-performing asset and start the proceeding of write-off or recovery, whatever is prudent at that point. Given the situation, the government and the RBI swung into action and said, because of the COVID, we are going to have a moratorium. So for a certain point of time, you will not recognize the movement of these assets from standard assets to non-performing assets. So therefore, whenever that cutoff is decided, you will find that the non-performing assets probability is that it will zoom up. So the Reserve Bank did this calculation, and Reserve Bank came out with different estimates and said that by March 2021, the fear is that there'll be large number of assets which will be called as non-performing assets. Now, they have given an estimate of both what will happen in public sector banks, what will happen in private and foreign banks. The fear is that in the public sector banks, nearly 15% of the assets will become non-performing assets. Now the issue is this something to be very worried about? Let me assure you, this is not something to be very worried about. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and in our own country, this had happened. We were nearly 20% of non-performing assets in 1993, and we brought it down to 2%, which is a respectable figure. So we are aware why this non-performing assets are happening. Because they are happening due to pandemic and worldwide, the same thing. Therefore, there's nothing to worry. Only thing is there has to be patience, and one has to prepare that this is where we need to make provisions for. There is another thing which we need to be worried, of course. There's going to be a transition. There are some industries which will take a long time to recover, like hotel industry, tourism industry, take time to recover. But then there are other industries which have boomed back and recovered very rapidly. Pharma industry has recovered very fast. Two-wheelers have recovered. Automobile industry has recovered because public transport is not a favored transport anymore. So people who can afford a two-wheeler or a small car have moved on. So there are some industries which are benefiting, and there are some industries which are going to suffer. E-commerce has done very well. So in addition to pharma, e-commerce is doing very well, but tourism and hotel industry are certainly taking a hit. So there's going to be a transition that will happen. In education, as you know, most of the education has gone online. So there is a transformation taking place. So digital platforms are making a big difference. As far as banking is concerned, the brick and mortar branch used to be very important, but now online transactions, digital payments, Paytm, Beam, these applications are doing very well. And therefore, there's again a movement from one type of transaction to the other, one type of market into the other market. So those changes are taking place. And as we come out of COVID, we will see that there's a big difference. During this whole phase that we are talking of, this 6 to 7 months has been used by the Prime Minister and the government to bring in various concepts. One of the concepts which has become very popular now is the glocal. So you think globally, but you act locally. And I think that is very good for a country like India, which is democratic, which has lots of domestic demand within the country, and which has a very young demographics. So one has to be aware of local. Now, we need some certain reforms if we want to be competitive, and the three farm bills that have come fit in this scheme of things in terms of domestic reforms that are happening place. The supply chains have to be taken care, but digitization, integration of the markets because of the digitization is going to help us. The government is already thinking in terms of performance linked incentives, which will encourage the industry to expand. Now, this pandemic is going to bring in some challenges which we should be prepared for. And as I look at it, there are going to be some socio-economic challenges. And first thing is going to be the unemployment. The worry is that the unemployment is going to shoot up. But if you look at the trend, it was very high. And the data which is now being released by CMI, a database, we are somewhere in the same situation in unemployment as we were in January. To that extent, now situation is calming down. The other issue is the labor migration. Lots of labor migrated back into their native places, but as things start improving, medical facilities are back in place. The lockdown helped the industry, the hospitals, to equip themselves and be prepared. So now when things are normalizing and lockdown is opening up, you find that the migration is going to come back into the cities. During the movement back into the villages, it's not that the labor was totally hungry and suffering badly. There was Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Scheme, under which they were supported. So to that extent, an unemployment insurance was provided to. Now they're going to come back into the cities and production should shoot up. I should also mention there have been different estimates of poverty made worldwide, and even in India, we are worried that it will lead to poverty. As Dr. Vishandas was saying, poverty figures are pretty high in the country, and 1 in 4 is suffering from poverty. The fear is that if unemployment increases, people do not have a job, the amount of poverty, the number of people under the poverty line can expand. Then there are sociological issues that are important, psychological issues that are important, and one of it is the crime against women and the vulnerable. And this could be domestic violence against women, against children, and against elderly population in the country. Now I want to start my closing remarks, and herein I want to bring, you must have heard this debate that COVID, was it a demand shock or a supply shock? And I say it could be both. There could be a decrease in production because of lockdown. We all know there was a strict lockdown in our country. In other countries there were, but they are coming back with the second wave. We are not really coming with the second wave. There's a mandated shutdown which had happened, but then everything is opening up now. So that lockdown must have created a supply shock. There's a demand shock also. There was loss of employment and therefore loss of income. So therefore the purchasing power suffered, and there was uncertainty that was prevalent at that time, and therefore there was therefore inability and reluctance to travel, go around shopping. So there was a demand shock and a supply shock in the economy, and both have been addressed by the government to some extent or the other. Now, in the last 3 slides that I have, I'm going to talk to you of where are we heading. Now, what should we do? Yes, demand conditions in the country, in the manufacturing are mixed at this point immediately, but then the government is providing support and it will open up as we are seeing. As you have seen the data for the July to September quarter, it was very positive. This is the time when the economy has a busy season, which means there are festivals, there are marriages taking place, and during both the festivals and the marriages, people come out, demand is created, and the economy starts improving. That's exactly what is going to happen. Capacity utilization in some industries back to 75%, and therefore the sale of cars, motorcycles, tractors is improving. So things are becoming better. The world situation is bad, but then there are statistics which show that their recovery has also started and our exports have started improving. Credit expansion is expected to be there. Interest rates are already low, and we are thinking that this is where the interest rates will prevail. So probably industry will find it really good to come. We are not sure what is going to happen, but in the main policy of the Reserve Bank, which comes in April 2021, probably they will continue to either lower the interest rate or retain the interest rate at the lower level where it is already. If you look at the medium to long run, the price of oil is going to stabilize. To that extent, countries which were dependent on oil, the uncertainty that they were facing will probably stabilize and our exports will do better. Price of gold, again, which is generally very volatile during periods of crisis, will continue to be volatile, as is the prediction. Trade disagreements are there everywhere. Everybody is talking in terms of tariff wars. Brexit is unfolding in front of us. US versus China issue is going to come up with a change in the US regime. And India and its neighbors situation again is little complex, as you know. So there is a global uncertainty with which we will have to grapple in the few months from now. Despite all this, India will be a favored destination for very important reasons. As I showed you in the slides, we are going to be the fastest growing country in the world by 2021. We have a large market, population is very large. We have huge hinterland in the rural areas. We were on an average growing nearly 7%. Yes, this year we did take a hit, but next year we are 8.8 and we certainly are going to do more than 7, which is amongst the fastest growing countries of the world. Our investment is high, nearly 30%. So there are lots of opportunities within the country. Northeast is being told as a potential growth area. We have mining areas in Bihar and Orissa. We have a long coastal line and we have much more manufacturing and advanced states in Maharashtra and Gujarat. So we have all types of markets and people, industry globally, which wants to move out of China. We provide them a great destination and with high investment locally, and they come as look at India as an opportunity. Probabilities our investments will go further. We have a very well-developed market, financial markets, our government market, our money market, the call market, the foreign exchange market, all of them are doing very well and flourishing. And we have a stock market. Now, when there's a stock market, you are investing on it, you are seeing the results. We already have 5,000 listed companies. So we are a good destination for more companies to come in. Then we have very good regulators. We have the RBI, SEBI and insurance regulator, which many countries don't have the credibility that our regulators have. And then whatever said and done, there are elections regularly around the year, but the stability, political stability in the country is very strong. There have been complaints that we are very high on corruption. Corruption is disruptive to growth, but then we have taken measures. Demonetization was taken earlier, which is an anti-corruption measure. And then we have introduced goods and services tax across the country. And so one country, one tax is something which everybody will benefit from. This is my last slide. As I look at it, there is a possibility of a regional cooperation in the area. And therefore, we have mutually expansionary markets. If we do well, other markets around us will do well. We are already thinking of Look East policy, and we are also looking at Central Asia. So therefore, with our neighbors and in our neighborhood, we are thinking of expanding. And because of COVID, the attractive destination that China was is no more there. So the world is open, and therefore we have lots of scope of expanding relationship in our immediate neighborhood. So we should start thinking in terms of a United States of South Asia, where India will play a very important role. We can also start thinking, in case we do well in our region, of having a monetary union like the Euro area, where there would be a single currency. So with that, I close my presentation, and I am happy to take any questions if there are. And I thank once again Amas and Colonel MP for giving me this opportunity to come and speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Some questions are coming in. Thank you firstly for a very elaborate insight into our economy and in the coming months and the coming year. Deepak Biss is asking, since this COVID-19 crisis has given a shock to both end demand and supply, what should be the nature of coming policies, either demand side or supply side, and why? How it will help to come from this recession period?
Yes, that's a good question, I must say. It's a difficult time that we were facing. And in this difficult time, as you know, all things had to be done. There have been arguments on the supply side shocks, lockdown. There have been arguments on the demand side, yes, but I'll share something very interesting with you. In rest of the world, when a pandemic like this hits, it's the government which bails out the people. You must have read checks being given to people in UK, in the USA. But you know what happened in India? The Prime Minister, with his very charismatic personality, appealed to the private sector and said, please do not chuck anybody out. You can, please, this is treated as an investment and please keep the labor force together. So what did the industry do? The industry promised the Prime Minister will not throw people out. We will pay them whatever we can. And most of the industry started working either at a 30% cut or a 50 or even a 70% cut, but unemployment was not there. So this is something which is very amazing that happened in our country. It's the perfect example of a public-private partnership that happened. You can tell me that the country has a highly unorganized sector. In the unorganized sector, you have the hawkers. How would they do and what would they do? As you know, the government announced schemes for the hawkers also, Mudra loans also, and under the Mahatma Gandhi rural employment, many schemes, a number of days, the amount of payment was also enhanced. To that extent, the government took care of the demand and supply side. The moratoriums that were given for the loan products by the bank to the industry. So to that extent, the government has taken care of both demand and supply side. And I think taking it forward, the government is also not pushing too hard on the tax things, tax laws, tax deadlines. Now, what does it mean? The advantage of this endurance that the government showed and the patience that the government showed is reflected in GST collection more than 1 lakh crore in the last 2 months. That means the industry's resilience happened, the industry is bouncing back. Similarly, if you look at the hawkers, there is some data which shows that local bodies played a very important role in supporting the hawkers and giving them money. So the hawkers are back. You look around your own town or village or small cities, you will see that the life in the small cities is limping back to normalcy. So the schemes that have been announced by the government, both the lockdown now being slowly taken away, local industry, MSMEs, local large industry operating, local shops opening up. So there is a revival in the growth of the country. The data which came in for July to September was in a very positive zone. And I am predicting that if you look at the data for October, November, December, festival season, marriage season, it will be much more optimistic than what has been anticipated. By January, February, March, and again we have some more festivals lined up there. Christmas is there, New Year is there, Holi is there, and Lodi is there. These festivals, all sort of pan-India festivals, they bring in enthusiasm and they also help in recovery. So I think the government measures as well as the time of the season that we are in for good recovery.
So there are 3-4 more questions. I'll quickly first tell you all the 3-4 questions. Thereafter, you can answer them. One is that very interesting question: how did India's boycotting China's apps affect China? That is one. Second is, by when do you think we'll reach 5 trillion economy? And third is money manipulation, how it affects the trade.
So when we do some sanctions against a country, say we not use the apps of China, I don't think it impacts China in a very big way. But what happens, it at least brings the Indians together. The Indians know that the attention of the Indian mind, the attention of the Indian population, both within the country and outside the country, then all the energy is focused and you start thinking in terms of global. It certainly impacts the sentiments. China also understands that there is a boycott of their products. Their usage obviously gets impacted. To that extent, their advertisement and the market value gets impacted. But given the fact that China is much larger than us, these are more symbolic. And because they're more symbolic, it is bringing the Indian mind together that is far more important. I think that's exactly what has been achieved and attained by this exercise that we did.
$5 trillion.
The second question on a $5 trillion economy is little tricky. The reason being, as I just showed you the data, India is a $2.8 trillion economy. Now, when it's a $2.8 trillion economy and it has a setback of 1 year, that means we will close the year again on March 2021. Probably will be still a $2.8 trillion economy. If we wanted to become a $5 trillion economy by 24-25, there's a little setback that has happened. So to that extent, we may delay it by a year or two. But I think if all Indians start working the way the Prime Minister expects, and I also expect, that instead of resorting to a 5-day working week, if we went to a 6-day working week, or we went to a 7-day working week. And these are not things which I'm saying are unimaginable. You know, in our own country, in the unorganized sector, people work 7 days a week. There are laborers which work 7 days a week. The rickshaw puller works. The local head load worker works. The domestic workers work. So many people in the country work 7 days a week. If we allow our industry to work 7 days a week, and we allow our MSMEs to work 7 days a week, to some extent we can recover. Now the issue is that you will produce, but who will buy your produce? Your export markets are not very happy and not very good. There's no growth in those parts of the world. Then who will buy your goods? That is the point which I'm bringing in, that there's so much of rural demand within our country. Rural areas are still not developed. Yes, roads have already been there, but the infrastructure is not there. So there is so much to do within our country. Now the positive thing is, the way Dr. Ashok Viswanathan covered his area, agriculture was not impacted by the pandemic. If agriculture has not been affected by the pandemic, that means the agriculture income is where it is. Nearly 60% of India lives in the rural areas. About 55% are dependent on agriculture. So therefore, there is demand within our country. So if we produce more and we are able to satisfy the demand within our country in the hinterlands, tier 1, tier 2 cities, and in the rural areas, I think we'll be able to recover faster. So our journey towards the $5 trillion economy, which the Prime Minister wanted by 24-25, probably is possible if we reorient ourselves and don't get bogged down by lack of demand from the rest of the world, but think and start exploring within the country. I think there is scope we can do it.
The last question was regarding money manipulation and how it affects the trade.
So I didn't actually understand the question. What is meant by money manipulation?
Yeah, can you elaborate, Pankaj? What do
Is it
you
something to
mean
do
to
with,
ask on that?
yeah, demonetization, or what is it? Or is it corruption?
Sir, it is a kind of money manipulation which US said that India is trying to manipulate the money, which is definitely affect the trade.
So there are different interpretations. I have not read that statement, I'm sorry. But I can tell you out of intuition what different people mean by that. They mean actually currency manipulation, that our rupee dollar rate is moved, and therefore the trade gets impacted. So probably they are referring to the currency manipulation. But I can tell you one thing, that currency manipulation is done far more aggressively by countries like China. India is one country where I worked in the Reserve Bank of India. I can tell you my first-hand experience that in India, we really do not do enough, or we should do more, but we really do not do enough currency manipulation, and many other countries in the world do, especially the way China does. If you ask me, is there any country which has not manipulated its currency in the last 10 to 15 years? You are in for a surprise. There is no country in the world which can get away by saying that they do not manipulate their currency. Not even New Zealand, not even America. What they will do is they all have floating exchange rate. They will say we have left it to the market forces. But when I used to speak to them when I was working at the IMF, that in case there is wild volatility, do you intervene? They'll say yes, then we intervene. Then if you intervene, then what decides that this is the intervention only for volatility and this is the intervention for manipulation? How do you do it? You leave it to the market forces. Nobody leaves it to the market forces. So there are some very good papers brought out by Kenneth Rogoff, who was the chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, who's now a professor at Harvard University. And then along with Kenneth Rogoff is Reinhardt. Both of them have come out with very good research on currency manipulation and exchange rates. And my own first-hand experience has been when there is fire in a neighbor's house, it is Agni Devta. But when it is fire in your house, then it is very, very dangerous. So most of these countries will tell that India manipulates because we are looking for advancing our exports. They will say India does and China does, but almost every other country does. But it is well recognized that India chases the volatility to a great extent, whereas the currency manipulation, basically to a great extent, was done by China. And that is why China was able to build foreign exchange reserves of $4 trillion. India's reserves, even now, are not even how much? $400 billion? That's where our reserves are. Much less than the $4 trillion which China built.
Right. So I think we'll end the session here. The questions can go on, but we have grossly crossed our time limits, and our guests also have commitments at other places to go. I only would like to say in the end, a big thank you very much to both our speakers.